Good morning. Continuing our review, summary of Hemshech, the conclusion of Hemshech Ayin Beis, following the essay that I wrote on the topic. So we are, go to the very essay. We're on page, what page are we, 36? I think, let's see.
Yes, the very top of 36.8.
Right, yeah. Good. Yeah, so we're coming to the conclusion of chapter 6 of this essay. And a big part of it has been, especially the latter part of this chapter, had been the contributions and the additions that Ayin Beis adds to the entire picture, namely that which is discussed in the Maimer HaMagbil Shavis. So quickly to sum up the points was first the interconnectivity that everything, the Neshamas, Mitzvos, and Torah all have both Mamat L'mayla, Mamayla Lamata. However, each of them has their primary, you can call their primary function, with Neshamas being primarily Mamat L'mayla through Tefillah, with the Torah being primarily Mamayla Lamata, and Mitzvahs, combination of the two. Point number 2 was the connection of Ner Mitzvah, a deeper connection between Ner Mitzvah and the Tefillah of Krishma. 3 was the connection of Neshamas to Tefillah, Ani Tefillah. 4 was the mile of Torah and Neshamas and Tefillah. 5 was the mile of Neshama and Tefillah and Torah. 6, which was a longer piece. 6, which we just finished, we didn't just finish, we finished 7. Milas HaTorah ala mitzvahs, and then Milas HaMitzvahs ala Torah, 7, which is, we just concluded on top of page 36. And we learned there how mitzvahs, the different points that Ayin Beis brings that add to whatever it says in the Magbil Shavis, which is primarily that the mitzvahs have two powers, they manifest in Gashmi Se'elam and elevate the physical world, and they have this Gula Miyachedes, this Gula Pratis, I should say, the special quality of elevating the animal soul. The Ayin Beis adds the mile of Kalim is rooted higher than the root of Kalim and mitzvahs is higher than the root of Ur. And the details around that, Galgalta, Shedish, I'm just looking here. Yeah, it comes down B'Poel Mamish. Yeah, that was point number 7. Now we're up to number 8, which is the final point in this discussion. The top of page, the second paragraph on page 36. So let's do that now. Milas HaNeshama al HaMitzvahs. So in Ayin Beis, it's interesting, he adds some unique points regarding this. Because in a way, though mitzvahs have something in common with Torah, because they come through Torah and they have an element of Mamay Lamata, but mitzvahs also have something in common with the Neshama. Because the Torah does not manifest a Neshama beguf. A Neshama comes into a body. Mitzvahs also come into Gashmi's objects. That's why, interestingly, Ner Mitzvah and Ner Hashem Nishma Sadam have something in common, that they both have the 3 components of a wick, oil, and the flame it creates, the light it creates. Because mitzvahs, like a wick of the divine soul that manifests within the body and the animal soul being the wisdom of the animal soul being the oil, mitzvahs is the Ratzna Elyon, the wick that manifests within the physical world. So in some ways it has something in common with Neshama, because it comes down to Gashmi's world. Obviously it's not quite the Neshama, because a mitzvah does not perform itself. You need the Neshama to do it, but a mitzvah does have that element. And yet, so that's the mile of the mitzvah over Torah, like we just learned. Torah remains Ur. Torah is primarily Ur, the light that it creates. You don't find the wick and the oil when you talk about Torah. But nevertheless, Neshama has a quality over mitzvahs. In addition, of course, that Neshamas are rooted in Atzmus, higher than all levels, and higher than Torah even, and therefore higher than mitzvahs. But in addition to that, there's some more points that we're going to learn right now in this, when you contrast mitzvahs and neshama, that Ayin Beis talks about. So here we read, this is the end of the end of chapter 6. And what we're reading now is point 8, Ma'alas HaNeshama ala mitzvahs, which is all part of the essay posted at Ayin Beis WhatsApp group. The Hemshech Didan, in our Hemshech Ayin Beis, that is, Amad Aleph Reish Ayin Aleph, on page 1271, Mavayir Hatam, he explains the reason Shetzarech Liyas Hagdomas Ha'aveda, it's supposed to be Ha'aveda, the nun should be a hey. The preparatory Aveda, the Etzem HaNeshama, Ba'aved B'chol Me'edecha. So we need to have in Shema, when we say the Ba'aved B'chol Me'edecha, and he called that connection to the Etzem HaNeshama, reaching its highest levels, because B'chol Me'edecha, like we learned, Blikvul, that has to come before Kodim Ha'aveda the Simcha Shal Mitzvah. That's what he discussed on page 1271. I believe it's from Mitzvah Rebbe's Maimer, another Maimer, that we also was a fundamental foundational Maimer for Hemshech Ayin Beis, volume 3. So he talks about comparing these two. That first you need the tefillah, like he said, Etzem Neshama Ava Mechol Me'edecha, before we get to the Simcha Shal Mitzvah. There he explains that there's a mitzvah and the Simcha Shal Mitzvah. The joy with which you do a mitzvah obviously elevates the mitzvah even higher than the mitzvah itself. And he explains why. Ki haneshama shein gam ke mebchinas hakelim. So here we go. Neshamas are also from the level of kelim. Remember, the neshamas are rooted also in the reshimu, which is rooted in the helam ha'atzmi. In the previous paragraph, we learned about the mile of mitzvahs over Torah is because the root of the kelim is higher than the root of the oir. So there you have the mitzvahs and the neshama have something in common. They both are connected to kelim. Mitzvahs manifest in physical objects ultimately. The neshama manifests in a body, but it's connected to kelim, meaning it manifests within existence, where Torah remains somewhat removed from existence. So they are rooted in the helam ha'atzmi of Ein Sof. That's what the Rebbe Rashab explains on that page, 1271. And because it's rooted in such a high level, that's why the neshama has the power, it's in the power of the soul, to awaken and you could say generate from atzmus, because the neshama is rooted there. And that there should be the Gilia Atzmas through the mitzvahs. The Bekima mitzvahs Bovad Harizeh Helam. This is exactly what he says in Ayin Beis. So the mitzvahs themselves, even though they do have the rooted in the Kalim, but it's in the concealed state. Here's the interesting twist. Remember, Torah, its main power is in Gilui. Oir. It reveals, it gives us direction. Mitzvahs on their own tell us what God wants. He wants you to put on tzitzis, tefillin, Shabbos, kashrus, all the different mitzvahs, but on its own, it's not necessarily begili. We learned this earlier, that if you just do a mitzvah, you're performing what God wanted. But without Torah that reveals, and now he's explaining also without the neshama, there's a lack of gili there. And we learned this at length in the Mitzvah Rebbe's Maimer when he spoke about Torah mitzvahs, where he asked the question, why does it say ner mitzvah v'Torah which seems to suggest that without Torah mitzvah, the ner mitzvah remains concealed. And he explained that at length. That bottom line is that there is, relative to Torah, a mitzvah is a more concealed state. It has the etzem in it, the rotzna elyon, but it's still more concealed. So he's saying now the same thing with neshamas. That neshama has the power, but the neshama does it as a oir and keli, neshama beguf. The Torah does it as a oir alone. So that's why the neshama is able to stimulate the atzmus and create a gilia atzmus in mitzvah. So that's why, if you want to have a mitzvah that's fully alive and dynamic, you want the neshama to be doing it with a passion and with a kavanah and everything the neshama brings to the table. But let's go further. There's more to this. Uba'amid Aleph Resh Pei Aleph Pei Beis, and on page 1281, 1282, Mosif, he adds another point. Kikidei lafich hakelim de mitzvahs, le'er v'gilui. Not to be mamshich eir. Mitzvah is mamshich rotzna elyon in the semer gashmi, in the physical wool, in the case of mitzvahs. Or in the other physical mitzvahs, an esrog, a lulav, or matzah, whatever it may be, shefer. But what about lafich hakelim? Can you transform the containers into eir? Transformation is a whole other level. Transformation means you're transforming the concealment into light. So kidei lafich hakelim the mitzvahs la'er v'gili tzrichim lagia b'sharsham behelam ha'atzmi. To do that, you have to reach to the helam ha'atzmi, the shadish. The zeu ha'idei ha'neshamis. Shein gam kem b'bchinas kelim. They're also kelim like the mitzvahs, but they have the additional element that they can reveal by the aveda b'mesiras nefesh b'izgalus etzem ha'neshama. The Rebbe Rashab says, through the aveda mesiras nefesh, in the revealing of the core soul. And remember, Torah plays a role in that, because initially, you remember, Torah is the outside light that illuminates, that allows the eye of the soul to see, until the soul itself can see without the need of an outside light. But when the neshama is finally ignited and is able to see, it in turn impacts mitzvahs, because in the case of a neshama, it has kelim, with Torah does not have kelim, and through the Aved Mesiras Bizgalus etzem neshama. Not that there is just an etzem neshama, because the mitzvahs also have an etzem, the rotzen elyon, but there's galus etzem neshama nasa helam lamayla lebchinas gili. Basically, neshamas have the maila of oidus and kelim. Mitzvahs is primarily kelim. Torah is primarily oid. So when you put it all together, neshamas ultimately are the central point, the central player, as I've been saying, in achieving all of this. But it needs Torah and mitzvahs, but in turn it has a quality that's greater than Torah, which we learned earlier, and now greater than mitzvahs, because it is what has the power to be mahapich. Mashenka de mitzvahs bulvad, says the Rebbe Rashab, on those pages. Mitzvahs alone, eina nimsha b'chinas ha'atzmus, rak ha'er shall be seder ishtalshlos. If it's mitzvahs alone, it won't be mamshech the etzem, it'll be mamshech an oyer, because every mitzvah is mamshech somewhere, as we learned. Their mitzvah, there is some light, but not the light of the etzem. Torah is oyer atzmi, is the oyer of the etzem. And mitzvahs is either a keli or a limited oyer that fits the keli, commensurate to the keli. And neshamas have both, have all three, I should say. And neshama begins by being a oyer b'keli concealed, when it begins.
The mitzvahs are also the tzoynos של הקודש.
Torah brings a atzmi, and mitzvahs are rooted in the kelim, are rooted higher, but the mitzvah itself is a limited revelation, is the lefi hakeli. So now, when you bring them all together,
But the mitzvahs are also the
I'm middle of
tzoynos
speaking.
של
Let me
הקודש
finish
ברוך
what I'm saying. I'm middle of literally speaking. Let me finish, and then we'll stop for questions. So, as a result of that, the neshamas, once they're ignited and they are outside of their state of concealment, because remember, they begin in a concealed state, more concealed than mitzvahs and Torah. Because the neshama comes down below, the neshama below is concealed in the guf and nefesh habamis. A mitzvah is Eivar and the Malka. And like we said, it's one with the melech, and it creates a yichud. Like he explains in chapter 23 in Tanya. So mitzvahs do, but it's limited compared to this Araisa v'kut shebrichu kul echad, which is a far greater gilui, like we've learned, and much more atzmi. But once the neshama is ignited and it starts climbing, and it's through the Torah mitzvahs that it does so, the neshama in turn is mamshech into Torah atzmus higher than what Torah has on its own, and the mitzvahs is mamshech atzmi, coming from this place, because it's rooted in the helama atzmi. And now when the neshama is megala, the etzma neshama, basically it's megala, the helama atzmi, so then it's able to help the mitzvahs also, not just be megala limited air, but like we just said, to use the words that we just read, let's read it again. Not just the oir al pisei dishtalshus. Chitzenius e'er be'erech hakeli. That's what a mitzvah does on its own. Lefishazeu rak ma'shakeli mamshech eir. By a mitzvah, it's only when the keli draws eir. The ilu ha'idei neshamas hakeli nepach le'eir. That's the key point that he makes there in Ayin Beis, that it's not just it's drawing eir, which a mitzvah does on its own, but it's nepach le'eir. And then in the parentheses, I just add, just to round out the picture, v'chein ha'idei esek b'teira b'kabol sel malchus shamayim. So too, Teda, when you have Kabul Sel Malchus Shamayim, which is a form of Mesiras Nefesh, more than just Teda on its own. Teda, Kabul Sel Shamayim, says in the Samach Vov, you also have the power to transform the Keli to Eir. But who learns Teda b'Kabul Sel Malchus Shamayim? That's the Neshama. A Teda on its own is just Chachma. Or even Eir Atzmi, that's what it is. When a Neshama learns Teda with Kabul Sel, just like when a Neshama says B'chol Meidecha and Mesiras Nefesh, then in Teda is Nimshach also a level at Nepach Le'er, as he explains in Samach Vov, and as we will probably talk about later in chapter 7, I believe. And all this is explained on page, in Ayin Beis, Sham Omid 1285 through 1287. And that concludes point number 8. So I'll stop here for any questions.
You said before that the mitzvahs are not much of the Rotzein Atzmi.
I didn't say Rotzen Atzmi, I said Eir Atzmi.
Eir Atzmi. But the Teda mitzvahs is the same as the Chokmotei.
Teda, we're not talking about Teda, we're talking about mitzvahs.
No. I'm talking about mitzvahs. But the same as Shel HaKodesh Baruch Hu. The same as the Etzem of the HaKodesh Baruch Hu. And this is even
but
higher.
Etzem is not the Gilui. But the Etzem is not the Gilui. You have to be revealed the Etzem. So,
right,
so if you go back to point number 6. One second. Just go back to point number 6 where he explains the mile. Do you understand the mile of Teda over mitzvahs? In point 6, we spoke about the mile of Teda over mitzvahs.
Teda is Gilui, and Rotzen is not.
Right, exactly. It's Galgalta. And there is a Gili in mitzvahs, but the Gili is a mitzumtzum dika one, like a ner, because it's mislapshus in gashmus, in kelim. Now, to get the mitzvah, the simcha shal mitzvah, to have a Gili atzmi, that's where the neshamas are able to do that, because the neshamas are rooted higher, helama atzmi, and they have all the milas, like I just explained.
Thank you.
You said something, couple things in this point, this paragraph that I didn't understand. I think at one point you said, I think, but maybe I misheard it, that the mitzvahs are rooted both in the Rishima and the Helama Asmi. I thought that referred to the Neshamas. You said something about the Rishima, and I didn't follow it at all.
In the previous section, if you go back to number 7, when he speaks about the mile of mitzvahs on Torah, so let's go back to point number 7. There it says like this. It says, paragraph 2 there, Kelim da mitzvahs, they have a mile on Eir, because the root of the Kelim, the Rishimu, precedes the root of the Eir of the Kav. That's mitzvahs, b'bchinas atzmos umuhus.
So your point is because they're a keli of sorts, in that sense, they're rooted to the, in some sense, they're...
That's what he said in point no. Yeah, he says it explicitly on page 1267 in Ayin Beis. He elaborates on at length. So again, because I'm not summarizing Ayin Beis here, I'm just bringing points. If you really want further explanation, I would just go there to Ayin Beis and read those pages, where he discusses at length why mitzvahs are kelim, and how those kelim are rooted higher. But it's not rooted in the Gili, it's rooted in Helam.
I understand. Thank you for explaining that.
Have an element of both. Once a neshama is ignited by Torah and mitzvahs, interestingly, then neshama has both elements, because it's going to go back to the Helam Atzmi of its source, but now it's ignited Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom, so it has all the milas. So it's like first, neshama needs Torah and mitzvahs. Then, like we've been learning, the neshama then gives back the Torah and mitzvahs. From the Etzem Begili. That's essentially, in a nutshell, everything we've been learning here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's extremely helpful. You referenced the Helam Ha'atzmi, which we talked about for that the neshamas are ultimately rooted there. But I think you also said that's true for the mitzvahs, which maybe I maybe I
all
misheard
Kalim,
you.
the
But did you
Rishimu,
say
are
that?
all rooted in Helam Ha'atzmi in a certain way. But they don't have the element of Gili quite like the neshama does.
Is the neshama above oil the kelim?
Neshama what?
Is the neshama, the shorsha, above oil the kelim?
As soon as you root it in Atzmu say Yisbarach, in Helam Atzmi, Shmaya Atzmi, there's no Eris and Kalim there yet. Eris and Kalim come later. The root of Eris and Kalim is the Keyach, Keiche, or Yecholte Lahoyer, Yecholte Shaloi Lahoyer. The root of Kalim is in Helam Atzmi. The root of Eid is in Keiche Lahoyer or Yecholte Lahoyer. Later it comes down to Eris and Kalim. The fact that a neshama can come down into a guf, into Kalim to transform this world, tells you right away that it is rooted in a place that allows for that. And that's ultimately the Kalim, which are rooted in Helam Atzmi. The fact that mitzvahs come down in Gashmis also tells you that. The difference is that a neshama has an oyer in it that's not revealed initially, but once the Torah ignites it, the neshama is able to bring down that etzem into mitzvahs, into Torah, even higher levels, and so on.
Is the Torah or mitzvahs are already connected to oilis the kelim, or they are also above?
If you go back to point 6 and 7, discuss that explicitly, that mitzvahs is keli, and Torah is oyer. He said that, if you look at the last point, number 7, that was the discussion, that mitzvahs are kelim compared to Torah, because mitzvahs come down to Gashmis Elam, yeah. It doesn't mean mitzvahs don't have oyer, and it doesn't mean Torah doesn't have a keli. We're talking about what's primary, what's its primary power.
The cloud, the Torah needs the mitzvahs. Yes, the Torah is megale, but the Torah needs the mitzvahs, because otherwise, what is the Torah?
Well, Torah has much more than just mitzvahs. And mitzvahs have things that the Torah doesn't have. I mean, if you're talking specific, breaking it down, this is what we've been discussing at length here. I just suggest reading again points 6 and 7 or earlier points. I summed it up. It's short, but you have to review it. What can I tell you? I mean, this is a constant review. Torah and mitzvahs are not exactly this. They're two different things. Ner mitzvah v'Torah. The pasuk itself says there's a ner mitzvah and there's a Torah. Yes, Torah is ikra v'yesei mitzvahs. He said that because the Torah manifests through mitzvahs. Remember, the Torah's guidelines, the heros of Torah, are channeled through the kelim of mitzvahs. But Torah is called Torah. Torah is the blueprint, so to speak, the mind of God. We've discussed. The fact that we say Torah and mitzvahs in one sentence all the time, in general, of course, Torah and mitzvahs, they go together. But here he's breaking it down. What's the role of a mitzvah? What's the role of Torah? What's the role of neshama and tefillah? Going back to the Maimer HaMagbi, starts with neshama davens. Before the davening, you start talis and tefillin. That's a mitzvah. The mitzvah is after davening. Torah is learning Torah. When you learn Torah, listen, Torah Vedic Mils Chasadim is different kavim. They're not even the same kavim. They're 3 different pillars. Do they overlap? Do they connect? Of course, they all complement each other. But keep in mind, I mean, this you don't need Ayin Beis for this. There's the thing called Mare Torah, Mare Mitzvahs. Like we spoke about the Daled Minim. There are Yidden that have Torah and Mitzvahs. There are Yidden that have Torah and not Mitzvahs. Mitzvahs and not Torah. And then neither of the two. And then we bind them all together. I'm happy to explain as many times as necessary, but it probably will help if you review it, because this is, at the end of the day, as I said, I'm not really writing a full summary of the themes. That you have to go back to Ayin Beis. This is more of using those themes to understand where it would go, what would be added by Ayin Beis as the Hemshech Ayin Beis would continue. So I can't say this replaces. That's why I'm so meticulous in giving page numbers. Do you have any page numbers you've seen already? Because I did look and I learned them inside in Ayin Beis. So everything here has a footnote or has a reference that you can look up. So if you really want to get it, and we learned it in Ayin Beis, you probably have to sit with this, read it slowly, go back to those pages, see what it says in Ayin Beis. I'm not telling you have to go do that, but if you really want to get the full picture, it would probably be the way to go. I just don't see a shortcut. I mean, I'm trying my best here to lay it out and explain it. But there are, as I said, everything here has page numbers where it's explained more at length. Doing my best here. Are there any other questions? And by all means, don't hesitate. I'm happy to help clarify anything here. It always helps to think practically. What I mean by that is, if you want to apply this, if you want to understand it, think practically. How does it apply in your life? In other words, you have a neshama, you daven, you do mitzvahs, you learn Torah. The Rebbe Rashab is giving us we'll call it the dynamics, the building blocks, the DNA, if you wish, of these forces, the neshama, mitzvah, Torah. So think practically. Every day you wake up, you say Modani, you go along, you learn some, or before davening, you learn some Chassidus, however the order is, then you daven. Not getting now the level of how high levels we reach, but as what everybody can do personally, on your level. Then you learn Torah. And then, of course, throughout the day, you do mitzvahs. You go into your work, to your business life, or whatever it is we do throughout the day, and we're trying to elevate that also to godliness. So all this that he's saying here, you can figure out, you have to figure out how that would be spelled out in your own personal life. You know, we know, for example, before Vayivarach David or other places in davening, we give tzedakah. Tzedakah is a mitzvah. And talis and tefillin is a mitzvah. Part of, even though tefillah is tefillah, it also has parts of Torah in it. In the morning we say Neisna Torah in the Birchas HaShachar. But then there's actually learning. All of these have different roles. When you learn now Ayin Beis, even though it's a mitzvah to learn Torah, this is primarily what we're doing now is Torah. When you're davening, you're davening. And davening has a different function. When you're doing a mitzvah, or the tzedakah, or talis and tefillin, or mezuzah, or whatever the mitzvah may be, that's the mitzvah. Each of these are adding to the whole picture here. So when you think of it in terms of Eris and Kalim, and more Gilui, more Etzem, ultimately you could discover it's all about revealing the Etzem in this world. That's the ultimate goal. But to do that is a big Aveda, because Etzem is concealed on its own. Revelation, on the other hand, is limited because it's diminished through the tzimtzum in our lives. So how do we expand our kelim to get more oir and ultimately the oir atzmi? Remember we spoke about the three levels. How the aliyah of the kelim of biyah and atzilus, the aliyah of kelim of atzilus to higher than atzilus, then the aliyah of the oir, three levels of rotzeh. So all this is the journey that helps us to start out in a world which is concealed. The neshama is concealed. With its support of mitzvahs and Torah, the neshama begins to climb through davening. Sulam mutzav arza, mamata lamayla. Then it begins to draw down things mamayla lamata. And they all join together as we grow, with the ultimate goal being that you have the etzem begilui lamata in dira betachtenim. Dira betachtenim, as the Rebbe spells out, means gilui ha'etzem. Because the dira is gilui, that God lives here in a comfortable way. Right now, in a hostile world, or a world that is not godly, you can't call it a dira yet. Our avodah is to turn this into a comfortable home for godliness. Dira loy. Loy is latzmuse. And where is it? In tachtenim. So to make a dira for Hashem, a gili of elikus, of etzem of elikus, atzmus, nesava kodesh baruch hu, in tachtenim, in this world, is through this, we'll call it three-pronged. The shamas are the active players in it, using mitzvos and Torah, all helping us go into the kelim, expand the kelim, bring oil into the keli, more and more oil. First, our oil that fits the keli, expanding that till you get to oil atzmi, until you get to levels that are even higher than Torah, in the shamas and the etzem, and then drawing that down into Torah, into mitzvahs. So you have this beautiful, symphony, if you wish, of neshamas through tefillah and through mitzvah and their mitzvah and Torah, all achieving the ultimate purpose, which is the central theme of Ayin Beis, the interface between Elikus and Elamis, between divine and existence, between transcendence and immanence, as we've been learning. That's a brief summary of what we've been learning here, and all the details are written out here as much as I was able to do. Any questions on what I just said, or any further questions?
What you said, I believe, very unique and accurate. But when I learned today what you said about neshama and its role in this process of connected with Etzem, I start to see the picture in general. There was a question if Hasidim are the commentary for Kabbalah, and I heard that the answer is actually Kabbalah is a commentary for Hasidim. What is it for us? I believe you answer this question that we find in all other sources, but you highlighted it, that Hasidim turned on the whole Judaism from what to who, turned everything that we're doing in Judaism to the main person, to the human being that is doing it. And when you gave us this insight, very small detail insight, how neshama is has dual capacity, that is exactly where Hasidim has an absolutely unique role in Judaism.
Okay, thank you for that. Good. Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any other comments? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead, Rabbi Gold, please.
Yesterday we were learning. I was always wondering how we would end up with B'chal Mo'odecha, the ultimate, the third level. B'chal Nashecha, B'chal Mo'odecha, B'chal Levavcha, B'chal Nashecha, Mo'odecha. It seemed to say yesterday that it was the Al Yidei Hagdama Da'ava B'chal Mo'odecha Mamshich Hamshachas Orein Sof B'Torah. That the level of Mo'odecha brings down Orein Sof B'Torah. Makasha Nasha Orein Sof B'Torah. So it seems there that it's sort of like, I don't understand how that relates to the shot of Rashi, that B'chal Mo'odecha is with all his money. You would think that with all his money refers to Kelim, mitzvahs, not Torah. Here it seems to be saying that this level.
Well, B'chal Mo'odecha has many meanings in Chassidus. If you go, for example, to Sefer Erchim, the Encyclopedia of Chassidus, I believe, if I recall, there's 9 different explanations of Ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol moedecha. So that's number 1. Many different meanings. They don't necessarily all have to be reconciled. You can try to, but not necessarily. There are different meanings. That's 1. Number 2, even in Ayin Beis, b'chol moedecha is brought in many different places, and different aspects are connected there. Some of them seem to be very flow right into each other. Some, they're not so clear. So the main points here are that b'chol moedecha in the Maimer HaMagbi L'Sheves says it's bli gvul. Moedecha as in bli gvul. So right there you could ask a question: what does bli gvul have to do with money? B'chol ma'meincha. Can you find an explanation? I'm sure you could, but I don't even necessarily go look for an explanation because you don't have to always connect everything. So the fact that it's bli gvul means it's the nefesh. Remember, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol 3 levels in ahava, avas Hashem. So in that context, what the Rebbe Rashab is saying is that b'chol meidecha, the bli gvul that a neshama is able to achieve in their avodah, after b'chol levavcha, after b'chol nafshecha, that in turn will feed and transmit a level of Ein Sof into Torah and connect the person. Because b'chol moedecha, essentially, simple interpretation means you're going out of your comfort zone. B'chol levavcha is with all your heart. So that's still you. Even though it's both sides, Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Hara. Chol nafshecha is already Mesiras Nefesh to some extent. But Chol Medecha is completely going outside of yourself to reach highest levels of Elokus that are beyond it. If you talk about Mamala Kalalman is B'chol Nafshecha in Ayin Beis. B'chol Levavcha is Mamala Kalam. B'chol Nafshecha is Sevav Kalam. And B'chol Medecha is Etzem. So in that context, once the neshama is reaching that level of Mesiras Nefesh, it in turn, obviously, is also going to inspire and infuse Torah with the deeper levels and connect the neshama on deeper levels of Ein Sof within Torah. So bottom line is, in the beginning, the neshama is receiving from Torah direction and guidelines. This is the early stage where the eye loses the light of Torah to know what to do. What says the Shulchan Aruch? What do you do when you wake up? What do you do when you're walking? What do you do when you're doing business? Simply like Shulchan Aruch Yid, following Torah guidelines. That's not Etzem HaTorah. That's not the Ein Sof in Torah. That's Torah as is directing our lives. But as you go deeper, and the neshama goes deeper into B'chol Meidecha, then the neshama is accessing its own bli gvul, Mesiras Nefesh level. Now it's able to access the Ein Sof within Torah, which is more than just guiding your life, but you're being mamshech higher levels of Elokus, revealing in Torah these higher levels and revealing in the neshama that Eir Ein Sof that's embedded within Torah, etc., etc. The way I would frame it. That makes sense?
Well, I'd never heard that before, unless we learned it before. I just missed it, which was, you said that b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, moedecha is mamale kalmim, sove kalmim, and then etzem. Is that from Ayin Beis? I don't remember those two.
He says it explicitly. Yeah.
And where? Do you remember where that is? I don't remember that. That's a fantastic way of looking at it. I don't remember learning that.
Yeah. You want to know the exact page?
Well, is it in the second volume? Third volume?
Third volume, and I referred to it earlier. I'm going to refer to it also in chapter 7. In chapter 7, we'll talk about this as well. I believe it's. Let me see. Let me see if I see the page right here. Let me see. Give me a second. I'll bring the Ayin Beis here. One second.
Yitzhak, you remember that pshat? Mamale, Sovev, and Etzem related to this?
Vaguely, I don't remember being taught like in one concentrated area. That was my question. Like just like he put it out there, just like that. But maybe um, it's vaguely familiar. I'll be honest, it's vaguely familiar because it makes sense, but wouldn't make sense to me if he hadn't explained it to me before. So that's the only reason I think he may have explained it before.
I believe it's here. 1 second. Yeah. Go to page 1411 and 1424.
Wow.
I'm sorry, Robbie, you said you're giving a 13-page citation, 1411 to 1424?
I said 1411 and 14, not 14. Yeah, it's in that whole section, but primarily 1411. I think he begins. That's one place. There's also more.
Wow.
Earlier also.
Again, is mamale, and etzem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 1411 and 1424 and more. There's earlier as well. He speaks about it more at length.
I had a follow-up question, but I didn't want to interrupt.
Anyway, when I explained it, I elaborated a lot on that. There was a lot of talk on that matter. So if you really want to go into that, I would advise to, I suggest you go to the recorded classes of those pages. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow.
Rabbi, I just wanted to understand a little better. Forgive me, this is probably review, but and if it's distracting, just take it. I'll take it offline. But you were talking about how etzem is revealed through the shamas and mitzvos, but I'm not sure I recall how etzem is revealed through Torah.
The shamas are mamshich into Torah from the etzem.
The fact that neshamas can read more meaning in Torah.
No, because they are rooted in Atzmus. So we learned that David in Mechaber Ein Sof into Torah. So Torah first reveals into the neshama, helps it elevate. Once the neshama comes alive and accesses its source, from its source, it's mamshich into Torah, even more levels of Ein Sof. Just go back to the Milas HaNeshama on Torah.
No, I recall. Yeah, but I didn't realize we were talking about etzem there.
Yeah.
But the neshama is the catalyzing force to enable that gilui. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's a whole discussion. Look at point 5. Point 5 is discussed at length.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
He even explains the difference between Torah and how the difference between the shamas and Torah and etzem. If you remember the shashuyim, tainug within Torah, tainug in itself.
Yeah, basically, yes. Yeah. It's hard to retain.
The only way you're going to get this is going to be
over and over. Yeah.
You could ask me I'm happy to answer any questions, but remember, I'm answering with what I know. If you want to really know it, you got to go back and read it and slowly piece it together.
I hear. Thank you.
As I've often suggested, take a piece of paper and see how well you can write down from what you know the relationship between the shamas, mitzvos, and Torah based on Ayin Beis. How much could you write that down from memory?
Yeah, it'd be real interesting. I'd probably look like a kindergartner.
No, but you know what? It's a process of learning. It's not a critique. It's on the contrary. It's how we integrate and learn this.
Yeah. No. I hear.
I believe you gave us
this didn't come to me overnight. I mean, I've been struggling with this for a long time in my life.
And today, in few words, you gave us the whole picture. It's unbelievable.
Great. That's good to hear. So I'll just read the last paragraph of chapters.
Okay. Just want to ask a question. We always refer to Lamaila, Lamata, Lamata, Lamaila. But that's a two-dimensional relationship. But when we add mitzvahs, there's Torah is l'mayla lamata, tefillah is lamata lamayla. Is mitzvahs a third dimension? That is meaning that's just not up and down. You would think that that's
I have a whole. We discussed this in a few classes just a few days ago.
Oh, I missed that.
It's essentially, if you go back, do you have the essay that I wrote? You have
Yeah,
that?
sure, yes.
So if you look at the essay, page 30, the whole section just on that question you just asked. How mitzvahs fit into mamatla ma'ala. Basically, it's a combination of both.
I mean, is there a lateral move and a third dimensional move, or is it only these two directional?
Well, there's the combining of the two. That's the third, where they become one.
Right.
That's how I would. And then the whole discussion on page 30 and 31 was how you find both in the shamas and in mitzvah and in Torah both, even though primarily each one has its own function. So there's also interconnectivity. They all have the others in them. There's a mamayla lamato and mamata lamayla. There's a mamata lamayla, mamayla lamato. And there's then how they all come as one. Sad atzmus that joins them. The yichud of yichud tata and yichud elah.
Right. And what about spreading out? That there's, what do we say? Nakuda, kav, and shetach. Don't we have to worry concerned about a kav is up and down. What about shetach? We're spreading it out. Is that concept?
I don't see
Right.
the link between the kuder kav and shetach to what we're talking about here.
Well, milamayla lamata, milamata lamayla is
a line is understand, but not every. But so is it. So what? So I mean, there are many things that are lines. Not every line necessarily has to fit into mamat lamayla mamayla lamata. The kav is a line. It goes from the top down. But it's not per se what we're, mamat lamayla is an avoidic language. Is the Hiserus, is it being initiated from below or is it being initiated from above? That's really the context here. It's not just which direction it goes. Like Asusa Dilatata or Asusa Dilela. If initiated from below, Mamatalamai, like Sula Mutzavarta Tfila, is initiated from the person. Teda was initiated by Hashem. He gave us the Teda. Just to use that basic structure.
Eliezer, if I may, just dumb it down a little bit to help you. I think I understand your question. Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm listening, especially in the world of quantum.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's easier if you just think about how the broad theme Robert Jacobson's referred to for years, the fusion of heaven and earth. And in that sense, it really is bilateral. It's two-dimensional. It's not three-dimensional. There's no spreading outward. I mean, in this particular context. So the question is, how do you accomplish that fusion? And one is having earth come closer to heaven, and the other is bringing heaven closer to earth, and the other is the ability to understand that it's really all one. And how do we see that oneness through Torah mitzvahs and masim tovim, the shamas Torah mitzvahs.
Or in simple English, he's using here the terms das tachten, the perspective from below, das elyon, the perspective from above, and then joining those two perspectives. So this is not so geometric when you say mamat lamayla lamayla. It's much more conceptual. When you reach down to your child or grandchild to lift them up, that's mamayla lamata. When your child reaches to you, it's mamata lamayla. A teacher transmits what he knows, mamayla lamata. A student initiates and draws out from the teacher, would be mamata lamayla. That's the context here.
Okay. One last question, if I may. Where we said
when God created the world, it's mamayla lamata. When we do avodah and serve God, that's mamata lamayla.
Okay.
Ani l'doidi v'doidi li.
I guess the third dimension I was thinking of like a dira b'tachtonim, that there's one thing to make a dira b'panemius in yourself through Torah Lamata, and then there's also the voda of changing the world, caravel times, which is
Well,
spreading out more, so to
I
speak.
have to just refer you back to the earlier classes. We discussed this at length.
Okay.
Mamat l'mayla, if you go back to the beginning of this chapter, Mamat l'mayla is commensurate to the person below. He even gave the example of someone climbing from a valley to the mountain, or someone going down from the mountain to the valley. Mamat l'mayla is on our terms. Mamayla mat is on God's terms. La'asid lavi will be the joining of those two terms.
Right. I mean, we've been discussing this from the climbing Mount Everest of spirituality since volume 1. I understand that concept of the Mila Matava. Okay, but if I could ask one last question, well, you said we learned today that neshamas are rooted in the in Etzem, Helama Atzmi, and the Rishima. But how does that correspond to the fact that God blew our neshamas into our bodies? Our bodies are from the Rishima, the Kalim, and then only later, and we see like even in a bris of a child, the neshama comes in 8 days later, yet we're saying that even though it was revealed later, the neshama, and it certainly has to show two different levels within the Rishima. One was the body precedes the neshama, we say that they're just two different levels in Helama Atzmi, the Kalim, which say in a person is the goof, and the neshama, which is also in the Rishima, but it's revealed later into the Kalim, but it's still of the goof, but it's still from Rishima and from Helam Atzmi. Do we say that, or how are they related, those two, if one precedes the other?
It's a good question. My thought on this, is a question I've had many times. My understanding of it, even though I don't think it's explicit in Ayin Beis or another Maimorim, is based a little on a Maimer in, I'm not a Maimer, a Sicha Chukas Tov Shemem Ches, where the Rebbe speaks about it a bit. When you speak about Guf and Neshama itself, in comparison to each other, often the Guf would be considered like the Keli, and Neshama would be considered like the Ur, like you mentioned. And but remember, the neshama from the outset was always meant to come into a body. Even Vayipar Ba'apav Nishmas Chayim, and where did God imbue? Where did He breathe? Where did He blow the neshama into? So right before that, it says in the verse, Vayikach Hashem Lekim Offer Min Ha'adama. He took Offer, the dust of the earth, shaped it into like clay, into the structure of a body, and then He imbued it with a soul. So the soul from the outset was always connected to a guf. It didn't just come from nowhere. So the fact that a neshama, even on its highest level, is not yet in a body until neshama comes down lamata, but from the outset, the neshama was crafted that it would come into a body, like the first time it ever happened. And that's different. Torah, that never happens to Torah. Doesn't say anywhere that God took a physical parchment and then imbued it with a soul. It says, "Anon nafshik sovis yovis." God took His soul, His very essence, His wisdom, His very being, and instilled it in Torah. But Torah is not a neshama beguf, whereas a neshama is a neshama beguf. So if you break it down specifically, the neshama has an element of oir in it, ner Hashem nishmas adam. The neshama can illuminate. The body is just an empty vessel. The body, if you think of it, is just a keli without any oir in it. Kegufa b'lei nishmasa is the expression we say in Pasuk Eliyahu, like a body without a soul. But if you think of the soul as being one with the body, and that's its purpose, so then the neshama has also properties that are kelim properties. So I would just simply say, in general, it's neshama beguf together. If you break it down, yes, neshama has an element of oir, and guf is primarily or only exclusively keli. And in that sense, that would be the distinction. But in general terms, neshama and guf go very hand in hand, and that's why you could say the neshama is rooted in kelim, which are rooted in the reshimu, which are rooted in the helam ha'atzmi. Malachim, for example, are more oyer without keli. That's why they don't come into a body. They can manifest in a body for a short period of time, but they never really become bodies. They don't need to eat. They take on the image of a body. So malachim are a very different level. Malachim don't come from that level. For oyer to come into a keli, or in this case, a neshama that's rooted in atzmus to come into a keli, means that the neshama is coming from a very high level, higher than oyer. Because oyer itself cannot be the source of the keli. And neshama is not the source of the guf. The guf has its own source. But the fact that neshama can come into a guf means that neshama must have properties that relate to the body. I hope that helps. That's part of the explanation I've given to it, but it's a good question. Not many people ask the question. I have always struggled with this. I've never really found, as I said, an explicit answer, but that's the more or less the picture as I understand it.
This is the song. This is what you just said is just a song. Absolutely unbelievable.
Okay.
But we say that when you said the kalim doesn't have the or in it, it's just a goof. But we say in the lasi lavo, the neshama nem in a goof. So it must be that I would think that in the goof itself, even though we don't see the or, eventually it will reveal a light, an or that's even greater than the or of the neshama, since the neshama will be.
Or you could say reveal the etzem, that the neshama nezunis min aguf doesn't mean gilui. It means the etzem of the guf will be revealed in the neshama. So neshama has it within it, and that's correct. What you just brought up is going to be part of the discussion next chapter 7, where in Ayin Beis, after we finish the discussion of Havaya Hu Elikim, remember the last expression, Yadaita Yem v'shavesa levavecha ki Hashem ki Havaya Hu Elikim b'shamayim mal v'aretz mitachas ein oid. This point of the guf, so-called sustaining the body, the body sustaining the soul, the guf sustaining the neshama, is a whole other discussion, and that is when etzem will be ultimately, the ultimate etzem will be revealed in the neshama. And that context, the neshama is more like oyer, and the guf more like keli. But I was explaining how sometimes we say the neshama is rooted in helam ha'atzmi and in the kelim, like we're learning here in the Rishimu. So I was trying to reconcile all that. But yes, at the end of the day, the neshama coming into a guf, when it finishes its job, the guf, it reveals the deepest levels of helam ha'atzmi in the neshama too. That's really the meaning of that statement.
Also, to add to it, Rabbi Jacobson, I mean, in the way
basically,
back,
let me just say this, one second. So neshama, the guf, generally is that level compared to Torah and mitzvah, it has that. But in a full revealed way is only l'osel lavi, when the guf will affect the neshama. Like we learned the nefesh habamis, for example, we learned increases the flame of the ner Hashem nishmas adam. The fuel of the oil is much more than the light in the wick itself. That's all part of this discussion to some extent.
So what I was going to say is that in the beginning, when we're talking about the actual or and keli, if you remember the discussion, it was saying that it's always a blending. It's never one or the other. So at the higher up you are, there is more or revealed. And as you come bottom, the keli becomes more prominent. So when you look at this aspect, you could also apply the same principle.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah. So let me just, to conclude, let me just read the last 2 lines of this chapter 6 on page, where are we? Page 36. The Peda Kabosh L'Maimer Zeh, in the next final chapter of this essay, Imitz Hashem Ninasa L'Shayir B'derech Efsher, with God's help, we will attempt to speculate or to estimate b'derech efsher, the possible conclusion, al pi kol ha'mavur li'el, according to everything we've discussed earlier, ma hoisa ulai siyum hemshech terav shalei nigmar. what would actually have been the final ending of Ayin Beis? And the connection to the beginning of the Hemshech, about Keser, Shashik Dimu, Yisrael Nasa Lenishma, and to the general theme of the Hemshech. So since we've talked now about Mamat L'mayl, we went back to volume 2. In chapter 7, I'm going to go back all the way to the beginning of Hemshech Ayin Beis, because every Hemshech ends where it began. And we never discussed yet the beginning of Ayin Beis. We talked about volume 2, about Tefillah and Teira and Mamat L'mayl Mata. But now we're going to take it back all the way. Remember I said we're going to go backwards. First answer the latest questions, and then work our way back till we get back to the beginning of Ayin Beis. So that's going to be the next chapter. It's not going to be such an easy chapter. It's quite complicated, but we'll make it through, and you'll see how it all ties together. A lot of these points that we're discussing right now will come together in a very beautiful way. So we'll stop here. The end of chapter 6, more or less the first third of page 36 in this